afternoon, everyone. As you know, we were, four of us were at the White House with President Biden earlier in the day, and I think it's pretty safe to say we all agree we need to avoid a government shutdown. The Speaker was optimistic that they'll be able to move forward first with the four bills, and under no circumstances does anybody want to shut the government down, so I think we can stop that drama right here before it emerges. We're simply not going to do that. So we're going to come close, I hope, to having an orderly appropriation process, obviously not by the time we should have done it, but better than we've done some years by getting this four through and then doing the balance of them as a minibus a little bit later.
President Biden has finally determined that he ought to make a trip to the southern border after 3 years into his administration. People should make no mistake about it. This is President Biden and the Biden administration's crisis. It's created of their own making. It's totally avoidable, and they own this problem. And you look at the numbers just alone. 7.25 million people apprehended trying to come across the border illegally. Another 1.7 million known gotaways. That doesn't include the unknown gotaways. That's almost 9 million people in 3 years. And this last year was a complete record. December was the biggest month ever in terms of apprehensions at the southern border. This is a huge crisis created by this administration entirely of their own making. And partly because, or entirely because, they came into office and decided they wanted to do away with all the Trump administration policies that had been working and reverse course and basically put up a big welcome sign and have turned the border into an open border. So the House of Representatives has determined that Secretary Mayorkas has committed impeachable offenses. That issue will come before the United States Senate. I believe the Senate needs to hold a trial. I think this is such a miscarriage of the law, and it is important that the United States senators sit and hear, and the American people hear, about this incredible crisis at our southern border, and people need to be held accountable. And I think this is the way to do that. So I'm going to make the argument, and I'm sure the Democrats will try to dismiss it, but that we ought to be having a trial, conducting a trial in the United States Senate to determine, again, whether or not these are impeachable offenses.
Joe Biden and the Democrats have squandered American strength, and as a result, they have surrendered the peace, and it's evident all around the world. I've just gotten back from the Middle East, where I was with the Wyoming Air National Guard, 140 members who were stationed in Djibouti. These Wyoming soldiers are in a hot spot, and they are face-to-face with Iran, and Iran's goal is terrorism and death to America. Iran-funded Houthis are attacking our ships in the area with missiles as well as drones. And Joe Biden is asleep at the switch. The day I got back, we got even more disturbing news about how asleep Joe Biden and the Democrats have been. And that's with a report that this country is not doing what it needs to do to stop the flow and the sale of oil from Iran to China. Shadowy tanker ships have moved 59 million barrels of oil, worth $2.8 billion. The oil ships, the tankers, have all ended up in China, and the cash has ended up in Iran. This is the money that Iran has used 140 times to attack American soldiers in just the last 4 months. And then the President's hapless Secretary of Treasury came to Congress and testified falsely, inadequately, incorrectly, that they're doing all that they can to stop this flow of oil. The Democrats and Joe Biden are looking the other way as Iran continues to outplay our diminished president. American weakness is on display all around the world. Joe Biden bumbles, and what we see is Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea on the move. The American people deserve a strong president and a nation that is strong and safe and secure.
I want you all to look at these two photos, one from 2016 and one from 2024. Biden has to address his border disorder. He can do this. We recently learned about the death of 22-year-old Laken Riley, who was killed by an illegal immigrant that Biden let across our border. The young man that killed Laken Riley crossed into El Paso illegally in 2022. He was then released into the interior of our country, and just 5 months ago, he was arrested in New York City for child endangerment. Yet, even though he had been arrested, somehow he was still able to go to Georgia and take the life of Laken Riley. Too many families have been hurt by this Biden border disorder. And I have been warning about these illegal immigrants that are crossing into the United States and the harm that they continue to cause in the United States of America, and that these perpetrators need to be fully prosecuted, since an illegal immigrant in 2016 was able to kill this other young woman, Sarah Root. Those who come illegally continue to break our laws. And make no mistake, Biden has just made it worse. He has the authority to do something today about this crisis, and yet he refuses to do it. So let's stop these deaths. Let's stop these murders. Let's control our border. Biden, you can do it now. Do it.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to talk a little bit about Laken Riley and what we see with the illegal immigrant who's been arrested in her murder. If we think about it from a parent perspective or from a friend perspective, how many times throughout our lives do we think our children or that we're in a safe place? We're going to go out for a run on a college campus very close to where we're in school, in the middle, of a very safe area. And the next thing you get is the call as the parent that your daughter's been murdered, brutally murdered. And then you hear the circumstances of the person who's been arrested for her murder. This is so avoidable. And it does lay right at the feet of President Joe Biden. His catch and release policies are the reason his use of parole is the reason that one individual impacted that family and her friends for the rest of their lives. And so, as Joni just mentioned, I would implore the president to do something. It's been within his power. I think it's sort of not even ironic, but a little bit laughable that now you're reading reports where the president says, I might do an executive order. Haven't we all been saying you can do executive orders like President Trump did? You could have done this 3 years ago. And maybe Laken Riley would still be with us here today. So, for that reason and that reason alone and all of the other issues that go along with not knowing who these folks are, where they're from, what their intentions are, what kind of criminal records they have, President Biden has got to do something and do it quickly. On the appropriations front, on the Appropriations Committee, there are 2 dates to remember. July 27th is when we passed all of our appropriations bills out of the Appropriations Committee bipartisan. Senator Schumer has neglected, except for in November, the second day to remember, except to put up 3 bills. We've had these bills out. They've been fully looked at by and on available for people to look at for months now. And there's no reason we can't do what the leader said, which is to go to regular order hope for the first 4 bills and stop this whole charade of government shutdown. We can't do our work. It just reverberates around the American public. The American public's worried about a couple things. Safety. They're worried about when they go to the grocery store that they're paying more than you've paid for food in decades, proportionally. They're worried about the education of their children. They're worried about the safety of our international men and women as they're deployed. So I think that the least we can do as a United States Senate is to get Senator Schumer to put us to regular order, to vet these bills, to get them across the finish line and have the President sign them. Thank you.
3 years ago, Joe Biden appointed Kamala Harris as border czar. Do you remember that? The border czar. And I quote President Biden when he said, "She speaks for me," and I quote, "is the most qualified person to do it." So where is the border czar now? She won't be with Joe Biden on the border later this week when he visits for only the second time as president. Let's be clear. When the White House scrambled on what they should do, they said, okay, let's send the president down the border. Why? Why? Because he's got a political crisis on his hands, not because he wants to solve the border crisis. He has a national security crisis, but the White House sees this as a political crisis. And so they send him down the border for the photo op. I hope he finally opens his eyes without having his border czar, who speaks for him, with him, to see what the American people already know. The southern border is in chaos. 9 million illegals crossing and counting. Record fentanyl flooding our country. Record illegals on the FBI terror watch list. I spoke with a high-level individual from Central Asia today who said they believe there were over 50,000 Central Asians who have come across the southern border just last year, and they're very concerned they're individuals who were part of sleeper cells for a possible terror attack on our soil. The result of Biden's border crisis is deadly. When will enough be enough? We've been rocked by the murder of Laken Riley, an innocent 22-year-old nursing student in Georgia. That hits close to home as a father of 2 young women. When will enough be enough? Mr. President, do your job and protect our homeland.
Leader McConnell? Over the weekend, Senator Thune came out and he endorsed Trump. The other lieutenants have endorsed Trump. Why are you holding out and endorsing your likely nominee?
I don't have any announcement about that today.
Leader McConnell, you spoke about the Speaker being optimistic to move the 4 bills, but what do you see the path in this short period of time to avoid a shutdown? I mean, is the Senate going to wait for the House, or are we going to pass the deadline a little bit on Friday night?
I think we're getting close on the first 4 bills. Hopefully that won't require another short-term CR, and hope springs eternal.
Leader McConnell, Senator Thune just said that he would support a full Senate trial for Alejandro Mayorkas here in the Senate. Do you also support a full Senate trial for Myorkas?
I think that would be the best way to go forward, yeah.
Leader McConnell, Mr. Leader, could you talk about Speaker Johnson's position on the supplemental in that meeting with the President? Did it seem as though he's prepared to bring Ukraine to the floor of the House?
You can ask the Speaker about his views. I give you mine. You're familiar with them. What I hope is that the House will take up the Senate bill and let the House work its way. If they change it and send it back here, we have further delays. Not only do we not want to shut the government down, we don't want the Russians to win in Ukraine. And so we have a time problem here, and the best way to move quickly and get the bill to the President would be for the House to take up the Senate bill and pass it.